Grayson Report. Happy Veterans Day here in the US, and it's Remembrance Day in Canada. What is up, everyone? How's your Monday going? We'll wait a few minutes for people to trickle in. Did anyone do anything interesting over the weekend? What is up, Tammy, Matthew, Carol, and Lisa Boo, and Joanne? I didn't do much this weekend. I just relaxed, but I didn't really watch anything either. I was trying to think. No. Kind of just was watching DJs on Twitch. But while we're waiting for people to trickle in, we'll get into some movie news. Brandon, what is up? So Alien Romulus confirmed streaming release date for those of you that rather watch movies in the comfort of your couch. Nerd Report in the house. Joanne goes dull, rainy, and cold here. It was kind of a cooler day here today, too. Carol's putting up Christmas decorations outside while it's fairly warm and fixing others as I go. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Tales told in the dark. What is up? How's it going? So for those of you that like to watch movies in the comfort of your own home, on the couch, kind of like what I like to do, Alien Romulus will soon hit a streaming service near you. Alien fans are just a few weeks away from being able to stream the latest installment in the sci-fi franchise Alien Romulus. The trailer looked pretty cool. I was actually looking forward to this. Premiered in cinema earlier in the year. The movie from writer-director Fede Alvarez, Evil Dead Don't Breathe, will land on Hulu in the US on November 22nd for those of you that have Hulu. No word yet as to when those in the UK can feast their eyes on the filmmaker's gory sequel, but it's likely that Romulus will be released on Disney Plus on the same day. I would think it is because Disney owns Hulu. And I was kind of, when I saw that it was going to be on Disney, I was like, Alien Romulus is going to be on Disney? And I was like that. I forgot that it's Fox. And Fox is owned by Disney. So unfortunately, please answer the question above to reveal. Huh? Why do I have to? That was the weirdest thing. Set between the events of 1979 Alien and its 1986 sequel Aliens, Alien Romulus sees a group of young colonists having a close encounter with the xenomorph. The cast include Priscilla's star Kaylee Spaney, Ray Lane's David Johnson, Shadow and Bones Archie Renox, and Madame Web's Isabella Merced. The film received mostly positive reviews, with critics praising the performance and how the movie honors the predecessors, but questioning the choice to digitally recreate the late Ian Holm, who played Android Ash in Alien, for the new role of synthetic Rook. Weighing in on the controversy with the LA Times in August, Alvarez defended his decision, saying, "We were not trying to do what can't be done, which is to reproduce that person's talent as an actor, because this is another character. We knew we were going to create an animatronic, and that later we were going to do CGI enhancements in the mouth and in the eyes, depending on the shots," he continued. Then the question arose, what face does it have? Who is it? The only one who hadn't reappeared and who we found fascinating was Ian Holm. I don't remember Ian Holm. But for those of you that have been anticipating Alien Romulus, it will hit Hulu. For those of you that have Hulu, November 21st. It did say they don't know when the UK. You did not hear it from me, but if you had a VPN, you can sign in as another country and you'll be able to see, you would be able to watch Alien Romulus, because it's weird, because when you go to Disney Plus under a different country, it's completely different than from here in the States. So you can always do that, but you didn't hear it from me. Matthew, how's it going? Carol goes, happy Veterans Day from one veteran to all that are here. that is one that I am looking forward to. Hopefully it's not hopefully it does justice, because the last couple of ones I've watched have been kind of disappointing. So I'm hoping that one is a little better. I don't know if you guys had heard, I thought I'd share this because it's kind of crazy. That Mattel put some X-rated information on the doll box or something like that. All I was thinking, oh, I gotta get one. I don't collect these dolls, but I was thinking, oh my god, it has a misprint. You know how much money these things would go for if you're a collector. Mattel has wicked X-rated surprise for doll collectors. I saw it in the news this morning. Someone at Mattel is in big trouble. Could the theatrical adaptation of the musical Wicked be cursed? First, it was put on hold twice since 2018, and then it was announced it would be released in 2 parts with a year break in between. Then lead actress Cynthia Erivo Elphaba made a viral stink over a fan-made poster in which her face was blocked out to capture the illustration of the original Broadway playbill. Now its merch is being scandalized. Barbie doll company Mattel released their version of both the Elphaba and Galinda dolls to tie into the film, which releases on November 22nd. But the toy company is now apologizing out of... What did they do? Out of embarrassment, because they released the dolls in boxes marked with a link to an adult website. Dun, dun, dun! Oh. Okay, who was the quality assurance person checking the boxes and the prints on the boxes? What? I wonder who found out. I wonder, because a lot of times I know with me, if I see a website on a box, I don't normally click on it unless there's something I want to see more of the product. That is a big mistake to make on a children's toy. I'm sorry, I have to laugh. It's hilarious at the same time. So the person who did cute quality assurance on the prints and on the proofs is probably going to get fired. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know if they did or not because there's nothing about it. But the official movie website is wickedmovie.com, but Mattel left out the movie part of the link, which leads people to an 18 and older site featuring pornography. This doll is intended for people who are 4 years old and older. If you can get a hold of this box and you're a collector, this box, because it has a misprint, is worth a lot of money. And that was the one thing I was thinking. And I was like, I gotta get that, even though I don't collect those. Now I really kind of want one. Mattel is pulling the dolls from store shelves. They probably already pulled them, so it's like too late. But not before many with the misprint have already been sold. If anything, they will become collector's items for those who hold on to them. Back in 1990, there was a similar issue when people noticed that the VHS tape cover art of Disney, The Little Mermaid. I know, I heard about this. Actually, Lewis had the poster for it that he was selling. The Little Mermaid featured what looked like a certain member among King Triton's castle spires, and yes, it did look like it. The rumor has since been debunked, but others of the original tape are selling them for upwards of $1,000. Oh my god, those people that got... Sorry, I have to laugh because I think that's hilarious. And mind you, this toy is marketed for 4 years old and older, and they put a sex website for 18 and over on a Barbie doll. It is a minor mistake because I know sometimes when we proofread, we don't catch everything. We're only human. It happens, but that is just a hilarious mistake. If you were able to get one, good for you. I'm assuming they're all off the shelves now. They probably put out a recall, so every store has probably taken them off the shelves. I would hate to be that clerk that had to take every single one off the shelf. Luckily with that, you don't have to look at numbers. It's you just have to pull them all off. So that's not too bad, but oops. What is up, Julissa? Panda Bear, how's it going? Chris Barber. Chris Barber goes, the camel guy has one of those. But like I said earlier, it is going to definitely be a collector's item. I wouldn't be surprised if it's on eBay right now for a gazillion bucks. I'm wondering. Hold on. If it is on there. What is it? What is it called? Wicked doll? Wicked. Let me see. Wicked Barbie doll misprint. Cuz there's one for one. Oh, I mean, it's not going for too much. 150, 120, 120. No, a bunch of people. Oh, there's one for $70. They lowered the price 10% off. 78. It's not too bad. I was thinking it'd be 90. So these people aren't being stingy. One person is 164, 245, 450, but that's for two of them. So it's not, I mean, the price is, I mean, it is overpriced with that. I don't know how much the doll sells for originally. Just out of curiosity. We're going to go down Mattel. We're going to go down Mattel Wicked Doll price. It's $24.99. So it's not, and then yeah. And then depending on which one, like the witch is 40. So yeah, that is kind of hyped up in price, but not as bad as I thought it would be. Julissa, sorry to hear. I'm a little stressed. My mom fell down her stairs and broke her foot and has a spinal fracture. Oh, Julissa, sorry to hear. Guys, hearts for, I don't know how to say this. We'll send hearts in the symbol of prayers because there's nothing, I don't know. Oh, you could do the prayer symbol, the hand, even though the hands, the prayer symbol. There you go. I forgot they had that in the chat. Or positive vibes, whatever you guys believe in the chat for Julissa's mom. Sorry to hear, Julissa. Hope your mom gets through it. Or hearts in the prayer symbol, however you want to do it. For Julissa's mom, sorry to hear. That must be rough. And it is nerve-wracking. Also, I have an article that Brandon shared with me this morning. And it's on the New York Post. Oh my God. Ads and ads and ads. No, I don't want to buy shoes for Christmas. So, thank you, Brandon, for sharing this article. Florida's unexplained ghost lights have been haunting unsuspecting drivers for 6 decades. It was published today, so it's a fairly new article. Florida's inexplicable ghost lights phenomenon has haunted drivers for 6 decades and counting, still with no explanation for its cause as motorists prepare for its potential reappearance in the coming winter months. The Oviedo lights have been reported on Snow Hill Road, a straight shot connecting to Luota, Florida. I am probably butchering these names. To Geneva, Florida, since the 1960s, according to local Florida historian Jason Brine. The blue lights appear primarily in the winter, most often around midnight, and always approaching from the south on a bridge over the Ekanlakahatchee River. The lights make it appear as if there is an oncoming car, except with the brightness of a train headlight, according to a blog post written by the historian. As terrifying as the image sounds, the ghost lights legend has been passed down for decades and is still used today as a rumor for teenagers to spread. Similar to the story of Bloody Mary Burns said, you drive out there and sit in the middle of the night, drink a beer, whatever teenagers do, and look for these legendary lights burned to old news 6. So there's literally generations of people who remember going out there taking a date, or taking some friends in search of these ghost lights, or people that just want to debunk it. There's probably those people too. Because of the open-ended nature of the legend, many have ascribed their own origin stories to explain the light. Some are simple, like one that attributes the lights to a car crash that drowned two boys in the river. Others take more creative liberties, like a story that pins the lights to a Cub Scout that wandered away from his troop with a lone lantern and was never seen again. So this is a bridge over the Econlockhatchee River in Seminole County, Florida, infamous for its unexplained ghost light phenomenon. That bridge looks creepy just looking at it, actually. The tragedies and the rumors, while specific in some cases, are unconfirmed. Burns told News 6 that of all the tall tales told about the lights, only one has ever been verified. In 1963, 17-year-old Norbert Hyman drove across the bridge with 3 of his friends to set off some fireworks. When they finished, one of the friends returned to the car while the other 3 walked back to the main road. The friend who went to get the car didn't turn the headlights on and drove down the main road towards the others. 2 of the teens managed to dive out of the way, but Hyman was fatally struck and died on the way to the hospital. Whether you believe it's the root of the actual ghost story and this kid is haunting, if that's your way of believing, or whether you just think that it's the root ghost story that kicked off all these other stories, that, I guess, is up to the reader, he said. The most likely scientific explanation for the phenomena is tied to the dead vegetation surrounding the lake, which can break down into highly combustible methane that may be the source of the bluish light, or a will-o'-the-wisp phenomenon, according to a local outlet. However, I was thinking aliens. However, no one has actually tested the swamp gas theory, and there haven't been any reports of the wisp in over a century. The only time wisps are ever mentioned during the modern day is more often than not in Pokemon discussion, as will-o'-wisp is a popular status move in the video games. With no firm explanation, the community has accepted the unsolved mystery, as the folklore surrounding it has provided families with stories to pass on through generations. I think it is the story of the teenagers that went across the bridge to set off fireworks and decided to drive without his headlamps for whatever reason it was, and didn't see his friends and accidentally hit one of them. I think that seems like more of a ghost story legend than anything else. Delay Lex, what is up? Ooh, I almost closed the wrong window. All right, I got a few. I was looking for Canadian folklore and I didn't really get besides that one that kind of felt like it left more to the imagination than actually gave you the actual folklore. But I did find a few Canadian. I got some urban legends here. Canadian legends from the Rocky Mountain and the mythical beast of Canada. And I did find some Canadian folklore on Wikipedia, but I take Wikipedia with a grain of salt because people can add, like, you or I can add something to it. So I kind of take it like it could be real, it could not be accurate, it could be accurate. So I kind of take Wikipedia with a grain of salt kind of when it comes to that. But we will start with the urban legends because I do like folklore. And the one place that I had never really talked about is Canadian urban legends or ghost stories. I always like to hear different stories. So 5 spooky Canadian urban legends. Every town has an urban legend. Those modern myths, which once proliferated by ways of playgrounds and backyard campfires and now circulate via smartphones and social media. Many of these, like the legend of Crosby, the boogeymen of Staten Island, are based on solid but only partially understood historical facts. They're more lurid details, perhaps deriving from an attempt to fill the blank spaces in the public narrative. Others, like the creepypasta character Slenderman, which slithered from its cyberspace breeding ground into the modern folklore, have no discernible connection to reality, apparently being nothing more than the products of imagination and credulity. So, with urban legends, a lot of them are, I love urban legends. A lot of the older ones were passed by mouth. So, and they weren't written down. So if you tell the same urban legend to 1 to 5 people or 20 people, by the 20th person, that story completely changes. Nonetheless, I do believe that some of these legends do have some validity to them. It may not, we will never know, because unless we actually spot, like, Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monster, or the Tahoe Nessie, unless we actually spot it with our own eyes, we will never know what is reality and what is fiction. I do believe in these stories, though. I do believe that there's some, like I said, validity to them, and it may not be the story that originated from, but there is something to it. Lisa Bugo's tongue twisters in this, people making sense of weird happenings. So what distinguishes urban legends from a proper ghost story? And I think there was a movie about urban legends too, as well. They kind of did a movie about it. I think it's called Urban Legends. Monster sightings and other accounts of the weird and the wonderful are their complete reliance on unverifiable third-hand hearsay. Their quintessential derivation from the account of some nameless friend of a friend, unlike most tales of the unexplained, which even the most hardened skeptic would be forced to admit have undeniable roots in the historical record. Urban legends are essentially fictional, party fictional, or unverifiable stories masquerading as fact. In this piece, we'll explore 5 urban legends unique to the Great White North. The Screaming Tunnel. So they're basically saying that urban legends aren't verified, but I feel like they had to come from somewhere. Like, so there's something, may not be necessarily what we're reading about, but there's some basis to it. Oh, Carol. Guys, I forgot. As always, guys, Skeleduck is somewhere in this background. Just remind me by the end of the stream and I reveal his location. Thank you, Carol, for reminding me, because sometimes I forget to say it. If you guys are like, who the F is Skeleduck? He is pictured on my upper left-hand corner, might be your upper right-hand corner. That is what he looks like. It doesn't matter what studio I am in. If I remember him, I will hide him. Again, just remind me at the end of the stream, because I do forget sometimes. And I've turned the stream off and I was like, but just remind me. So back to urban legends of Canada. The Screaming Tunnel beneath the Canadian National Railroad on the northern outskirts of Niagara Falls, Ontario, in the very center of the quiet rural strip separating that city from northwesterly St. Catharines, runs a small limestone corridor known as the Screaming Tunnel. Built in the early 1900s for drainage purposes, this dark 125-foot long passageway hidden away off Warner Road, not far from the Queen Elizabeth Highway and the Warren Methodist Cemetery beyond. Its entrance, shaded by overhanging vegetation, is the perfect setting for one of Canada's eeriest urban legends. According to local lore, the tunnel owes its name to a tragic event which took place around the turn of the 20th century. One night, a nearby farmhouse caught fire and a woman or girl stumbled from the inferno, suffering from appalling burns. Her nightgown ablaze, the girl staggered into the tunnel, wailing as she walked, perhaps hoping to find help on the other side of the railroad. Before she can complete her journey, she collapsed and died in the middle of that rough-hewn underpass. Ever since, disembodied shrieks as of a woman in agony have been heard emanating from the tunnel at night. Legend has it that if you enter the Screaming Tunnel at midnight and light a wooden match, something will blow your match out. and a blood-chilling scream will reverberate throughout the passageway. According to an article on the website ghostwalks.com, the cyber home of a ghost tour company, which brings its patrons to the most haunted locales in southern Ontario, there is another less horrific story which purports to explain the tunnel's naming. The article cites an anonymous Niagara historian who interviewed a nameless woman who claimed to have lived in the area at the time the tunnel was named. Years ago, the informant had an eccentric neighbor who argued frequently and loudly with her husband. Without fail, after each quarrel, this cantankerous housewife would exit her home, walk across a field, and disappear into the screaming tunnel. Couple seconds later, the informant told the historian, "We all heard it, a loud scream. The first time it happened, we were scared. After a while, it felt normal. Expected. She and I swear this, walked to the middle of the tunnel and screamed at the top of her lungs. The birds never got used to it. We started calling it the Screaming Tunnel. Whatever secrets it holds, the gloomy corridor on the southern arm of Ontario's so-called Golden Horseshoe has an intrinsic spookiness, which will doubtless ensure its place in urban legends for years to come." Lisa Boo, that is a horrific end. I kind of like the first story first, but I do like the second one as well because it's basically a housewife after an argument. She's going to release some steam, so she went to the tunnel and screamed. That's kind of cool too as well. But whatever it is, I think I'd still be afraid to walk into that tunnel. I don't think I would want to hear some disembodied screams. I don't think anybody would want to, especially in a dark 125-foot tunnel. Joanne goes, some of us just go into the car and scream. Or heck, you may even be in your bedroom and scream. I mean, I guess it wasn't that far for her to scream, and maybe she just wanted to get away from her husband because that was who she was having an argument with to calm down. Understandable. The Wendigo of Fort Kent. I know I've mentioned the Wendigo. I'm pretty sure there's several versions of the Wendigo. Since the early 2000s, a disturbing story about a little-known historical event has circulated throughout the shadowy corners of the internet. The tale is set in Fort Kent, a remote hunting and fishing destination in east central Alberta, not far from the Saskatchewan border, which lies at the junction of the Great Plains and the Boreal Forest. According to the story, back in the 1920s, when the town of Fort Kent was rapidly dwindling into the tiny hamlet it is today, its 19th century zenith as a vibrant logging community being little more than a fading memory, a mysterious predator took up residence in the nearby woods. Local ranchers would head to their stables in the morning to find their horses horrifically mutilated and their cattle disemboweled in the fields. At night, they heard unearthly howls emanating from the forest behind their properties. One brave soul who ventured out into the darkness, huge pew-pew in his hand, with the intention of killing this nocturnal marauder, reported seeing a dark shape with brilliantly glowing eyes flitting through the trees. It almost sounds like, I don't know why, this reminds me of the skinwalkers that you see floating around TikTok. You see a lot of TikTok videos about skinwalkers where they be like, that's not my dog, that's a skinwalker. And I'm like, yeah, right. Because I can't believe TikTok anymore. TikTok is just, depending on what you're watching. But with the paranormal stuff and the alien stuff, it's very hard for me to believe it. But this, I don't know, it sounds very similar to a skinwalker. Shortly after the appearance of this unwanted neighbor, the wanting population of Fort Kent was bolstered by the arrival of two English immigrants, Dr. Thomas Burton and his wife, Katie. Dr. Burton was a physician and combat surgeon who had served in the trenches in Flanders during the Great War. His senses reeling from the carnage he had witnessed in that muddy, rat-infested world, he had decided to start a new life in the quiet Albertan countryside, where he might recoup what remained of his shattered nerves. Dr. Burton and his wife settled easily into their new home in the Albertan wilds. They established a medical practice and began making house calls to the more fear-flung residents in the area, for which the locals were internally grateful. By all accounts, they became pillars of the tiny community and were liked and respected by the neighbors. Not long after arrival of Dr. and Mrs. Burton, Fort Kent was ravaged by some terrible disease which proved lethal to patients of all ages. Dr. Burton was unable to identify this mysterious malady, and despite his best efforts, found himself incapable of effecting a cure. When his wife Katie was stricken by this disease, he did everything in his power to restore her health, but to no avail. Her condition worsened rapidly, and within a few days she had passed. Dr. Burton fell into a deep despondency after Katie's death and refused all requests for medical assistance, not even deigning to open his door to his desperate neighbors whose loved ones were dying in their beds. The disease continued to sweep throughout the town, and before long, nearby all living residents of Fort Kent were ill or dying. At the height of the epidemic, one young man who had managed to avoid contagion took it upon himself to seek assistance in a nearby settlement, perhaps Bonneville, known at the time as St. Louis de Moose Lake or Cold Lake to the east. Several days later, he and a handful of volunteers rode into Fort Kent with a wagon load of supplies, only to find it completely devoid of activity. An eerie silence prevailed, broken only by the distant buzzing of flies. The sickly, sweet smell of death and decay hung heavily over the dirt streets. Subsequent investigations determined that nearly every resident of Fort Kent had been brutally murdered at home. Most of the 24 victims were found lying in the bed, soaked with their own blood as if they had been slaughtered in their sleep. Some of the bodies were partially eaten. The only townsperson unaccounted for was Dr. Thomas Burton. Officers of the Northwest Mounted Police, who later investigated the scene, whose agency incidentally would be renamed the Royal Canadian Mounted Police later that year, suspected that the people of Fort Kent had been massacred by Dr. Burton himself. That shell-shocked physician they believed had lost his mind, the last fraying threads of sanity which anchored him to reality having snapped under the weight of his wife's death. One night, when the town was asleep, the deranged surgeon emerged from his home. This almost sounds like a horror film. Unkempt, unwashed, and wild-eyed, one by one, he broke into the homes of his neighbors and gave violent vent to his despair. When his grisly work was complete, he simply wandered into the woods to be swallowed by the darkness. In the wake of the tragedy, local Cree Indians whispered that Dr. Burton had been possessed by the Wendigo, an evil cannibalistic spirit said to haunt the northern wilderness. The mysterious creature that had mutilated local cattle in the months preceding the disaster, which had been heard howling in the woods outside the village, was undoubtedly the ancient predator on the hunt for a suitable host. When Dr. Burton lost control of his senses following his wife's death, the Wendigo infiltrated his weakened mind and took possession of his body. Then, in a vain attempt to satiate its ravenous appetite, it gorged itself on the hapless residents of Fort Kent before returning to the woods. In that sylvan sanctuary, they supposed that the body of Dr. Burton gradually metamorphosized into a gaunt, gray-skinned giant, the physical manifestation of the Wendigo. Such is the story as it is portrayed. Oh, I guess there's a episode called Creepy Canada. In fact, the story is a work of fiction created by the 29-year-old independent filmmaker Leslie Chivers, a native of Fort McMurray, Alberta, in the autumn of 2002. In a 2014 blog post on his website, leslieChivers.com.wordpress.com, Chivers explained how he conceived the idea after visiting Fort Kent while on a road trip with his friends James. It was one of the most creepiest towns I've seen that was still surviving, he wrote. The school was abandoned but not vandalized. The grass in the schoolyard grew to the bottoms of windows, blowing soft waves in the wind. A girl's lone dirty shoe was turned over in the playground under a swing that rocked back and forth as though a child were still swinging in it. We spent the day walking through the rest of the town, even though there were a few houses that were there, no people. We were it. There is a story here, a scary story. So when he returned home, Chivers began to research the history of Fort Kent area and discovered in his own words that the region had a lush history that included Wendigo convictions. Although he did not elaborate on which case caught his attention, it's likely that Chivers came across the story of Swift Runner, a Plains Cree trapper who killed and ate his wife and 5 children in the winter of 1878 in his camp north of Edmonton, Alberta. Although the native explained his family's disappearance by informing Father Hippolyte Leduc, a Catholic priest who headed a mission in the community of St. Albert, that his wife and children had died of starvation, his well-fed constitution led the priest to suspect that something more sinister had befallen them. Leduc relayed his suspicion to the Northwest Mountain Police at nearby Fort Edmonton, who conducted a search of Swift's Runner's camp. This happened in 1878 or 1870. Whoa, that's crazy. There, they recovered the sad remains of the trapper's family, which bore unmistakable evidence of cannibalism. Swift Runner later confessed to the murder, saying that his dream was haunted by the Wendigo, a sure sign, according to Cree tradition, that he was under the spell of that evil spirit of the North. He was tried, found guilty of murder, and hung from the gallows at nearby Fort Saskatchewan in 1879. That is crazy. So Chivers basically made up that story about the doctor. That was a very clever story. That is a very clever story. Carol goes screaming, not my thing. I tend to punch inanimate objects. Not in a long while. No one pissed me off that bad lately. Lisa Boo goes, that's just north of me. It's pronounced Leduc. Thank you, Lisa Boo. I appreciate that. But I like that. I like the story. That guy Chivers came up with a really cool story. But there is a story that he probably based it on that was a Wendigo story, so it's not far-fetched. The monster of Thetis Lake. On August 22nd, 1972, Victoria, British Columbia, Victoria Times published a sensational article on their 4th page under the headline, Thetis Monster Seen by Boys. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Thetis. According to this piece, 16-year-old Gordon Pike and 17-year-old Robin Flewellen of Victoria were swimming in Thetis Lake, just west of the Vancouver Island hometown, on the night of Friday, August 18th, when they were approached by a strange silvery animal in the water. A later article placed their sighting near the lake's concession stand, which sits on the lake's main beach. The August 22nd piece described the creature as being roughly triangular in shape, about 5 feet high and 5 feet across the base. The animal bit Flewellen on the hand, administering 6 tiny bite marks with razor-sharp teeth and sending the boys in a panic flight toward the shore. The teens returned to the lake the following evening, hoping to spot the monster a second time, and were rewarded for their efforts. In the twilight, they clearly made out the creature's triangular figure perched on a rock bluff near the concession stand. According to a later article, they described the animal in the States as measuring 5'3" in length, being fluorescent gray in color, and having 3 points on the top of its head. Pike and Flewellen decided to report their encounter to the RCMP at the Colwood Department just southwest of Thetis Lake. An anonymous Mountie informed the press, the boys seem sincere until we determine otherwise. We have no alternatives but to continue the investigation. The following afternoon, 2 more boys, 14-year-old Mike Gold and 12-year-old Russell Van Nice, also reported seeing a strange silvery animal in Thetis Lake, which rose out of the water and had a look around and submerged again. This almost sounds like Loch Ness. Their initial description of the creature was significantly different and far more detailed than that of their predecessors. An article in the Vancouver Sun quoted them as saying that it was vaguely human-like in appearance but had a hideous face and was covered with scales. It had a point sticking out of his head, said Mike Gold, was silvery and had great big ears. In the aftermath of the publication, a local man called the RCMP to inform them that the creature might, in fact, be his lost Teju or Tegu lizard, a predatory South American reptile which had disappeared from his home 1 year earlier. Although he had assumed the animal had perished over the winter, Pike and Flewellen's description of a fluorescent scale animal with 3 lumps on his head was apparently an apt description of his missing pet. In the decades following the flurry of dramatic newspaper articles, writers have put forth all sorts of theories as to the identity of the mysterious monster of Thetis Lake. In their 1990 book, The Field Guide to Bigfoot, Yeti, and Other Mysterious Primates Worldwide, which outlined a proposed classification system for the various subhuman entities reported in wilderness areas throughout the world, cryptozoologists Lauren Coleman and Patrick Haig placed the Thetis Lake monster in a class they called Merbean, which encompasses mermaids. I didn't even know there was a classification for these things. Which encompasses mermaids, sea apes, lizardmen, and the infamous chupacabra. They divided that hypothetical monster family into 2 subclasses, the marine variety and the freshwater variety, to the latter of which the Thetis Lake monster would necessarily belong. The freshwater subclass, they wrote, is characterized by an angular foot with a high instep and 3 pointed toes. The freshwater creature are often found venturing onto the land and are far more aggressive and dangerous, being carnivorous than their calmer marine cousins. And I did not know they classified these cryptids. Coleman and Haig went on, and I know I'm butchering this guy's last name, went on to explain how merbeans are typically shorter than the average man and generally lean and wiry. The mostly nocturnal creature have a sing-sing vocalization, they wrote, which have been reported almost universally from Eurasia to Africa. I don't believe that there are mermaids or merbeans. I know I do see videos that people claim that they have seen these, but I really believe that mermaids and merbeans are fictional. I do not believe that they exist. They're out of sci-fi. There was a thing back then with the Fiji mermaid, but it was really a mummified monkey sewn onto a tail to a fish. That was, so it wasn't really anything. I don't even think there's anything legit pointing out that they do exist. Kyle goes, is that Okeechobee? They're saying Thetis Lake, Kyle, so I'm not sure. Coleman and Hugh proposed a potential connection between the mysterious creatures of Thetis Lake and the Chismos, a legendary aquatic creature of Haida tradition, or Haida. I want to say it's Haida, being the first nation native to Haida Gwaii, or the Queen Charlotte Islands, which lie, and I know I'm butchering these names, I do apologize in advance, which lie about 135 miles northwest of Vancouver Island. One of the few white men to document the legend of the Chismos was James Gilchrist Swan, an American Indian agent who had an office in Port Townsend, Washington, which Haida travelers would frequently visit on the semi-annual trading voyages down the Pacific coast. In his 1874 treatise of the Haida, of volume 21 of the Smithsonian Contribution to Knowledge, Swan wrote, the Chismos, or Chismos, is a fabulous animal supposed to drift about in the ocean like a log of wood, floating perpendicularly, and believed by the Haidas to be very destructive to canoes or to Indians who may fall into its clutches. Appended to the text is a stylized image of a Chismos, the reproduction of a tattoo worn by one of Swan's Haidas visitors. This particular figure is depicted with a fin-like appendage and Todden skillick or hat, which Swan wrote indicates this animal to belong to the Genii or more powerful of these mythical beings. That's a tongue twister. The Thetis creature is usually described with webbed hands, each with 3 fingers. Neither I nor the cryptozoologist I consulted were able to find a source of these details. It seems to be a case of a story drifting over time and acquiring new embellishments in the retelling, which is it's given considering, like I said earlier, a lot of these stories are told by mouth and no one really wrote them down. So as it's gone through generations, the story has changed. So they're basically saying the Thetis Lake Monster story has all the hallmarks of an urban legend. One question remains, how did a hoax so goofy ever become part of modern monster lore? So they're basically saying that the Thetis Lake Fishman was a prank. Although Loxton certainly debunked Golden Van Nice's sightings, he apparently failed to consider the likely possibility that the boys' hoax had been inspired by Pike and Llewellyn's report, which had been printed in the papers the previous day, which the RCMP regarded as sincere and considered credible enough to investigate. Like many urban legends, the case of the monster of Thetis Lake is not quite as open and shut as a popular perception purports. Perhaps Thetis Lake truly has a strange visitor in the summer of 1972, be it a tegu lizard, a monster of native legend, or something else entirely. Joanne goes, Pogo is in another lake. Lisa Pugo, thank you, Lisa Boo. I appreciate that. I feel like some of these stories are going down rabbit hole, so I kind of just cut that one down because I feel like it goes this way instead of staying like, you know how there's a path to the story, it wants to go this way and then it does that. So I'm trying to push it back in. The chilling tale of Coughlin's Coffin. If you're ever immersed yourself in a collection of regional ghost stories, you may have come across the tale in which the spirits of the dead appear to have reached out from the great beyond, exerting some influence on our mortal plane for the purpose of ensuring the proper treatment of their earthly remains. The phantom of a woman who died in a hiking accident, for example, would attract the attention of an outdoor adventurer, pointing toward her body hidden at the bottom of a ravine before vanishing into thin air. The spirit of a murder victim buried in the masonry of some historic manor will make scratching noises from the hollow in which his bones are entombed. One tale from Northern California, Northern Canada tells of the the goose of a fur trader. The ghost of a fur trader who verbally guided his undertakers through the boreal forest, barking orders at the sled dogs, apparently with the aim of preserving his frozen corpse from the predators of nearby wolves, and the preserved cadaver of one of the victims of the SS Kamloops, a freighter which sank in Lake Superior in 1927, is said to approach divers who visit his watery grave. One tale which invokes the eerie motif is that of a Victorian thespian whose corpse is said to have made a ghastly voyage of 2,000 miles to the very spot at which he hoped to be buried, almost as if guided by actor spirit. In the piece, we will explore the chilling tale of Coughlin's Coffin. Lisa Boo goes, even though it's in my country, there are some I haven't heard of. Matthew goes, poltergeist is loose in the hoose. Matthew. There's some I haven't heard here that I've read, and I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Canada has a long history of exporting some of its most talented actors, musicians, and performers to the more profitable United States. This tradition extends back to the days of Charles Coughlin, a classically trained theater actor said to have been born on Prince Edward Island, Canada's smallest province. After studying theater in England, Coughlin was brought to America by New York manager Augustine Daly, of whose Broadway stages he performed Shakespearean comedies and other theatrical dramas. The Victorian actor, who would enjoy a long and successful career in that land of opportunity, which culminated in an 1898 performance of a play of his own composition based on Alexander Dumas' French language dramatic biography of English actor Edward Kean. Although he toured the world, wrote folklorist Sterling Ramsay in his 1973 book, Folklore Prince Edward Island, the island always remained his beloved haven. The anonymous author of an article in the January of 1962 issue of the magazine Fate elaborated of the actor's undying love for his home province, adding he never forgot, nor did he allow his friends to forget, what a gypsy fortune teller once told him, that he would die in an American southern city, but that eternal rest would come to him only in the place of his birth, Prince Edward Island. The last detail is borne out by a line from his fellow thespian, Lily Langtry, in her 1925 autobiography, The Days I Knew, which identifies the gypsy as a crystal gazer who made the prediction while Coughlin was a young man. On November 27th of 1899, while preparing for a performance in the island boomtown of Galveston, Texas, in the Gulf of Mexico, 55-year-old Charles Coughlin fell ill and died of heart failure in his hotel room. Contemporary newspapers indicated that he had suffered from acute gastritis or inflammation of the stomach for a month prior to his death, that the malady perhaps being related to the alleged alcoholism he developed after his own scandalous divorce 5 years earlier. His body was sealed in a lead-lined coffin in preparation for future shipments to the town of Souris, Prince Edward Island, where he owned a summer home and was to be buried. When his widow expressed a desire to have his remains cremated in St. Louis, allegedly in accordance with Coughlin's own wishes, his casket was interred in an above-ground concrete vault in the Galveston Lakeview Cemetery to wait clear instructions. In the first days of autumn of 1900, 9 months after Coughlin's death, a terrific hurricane swept up the Gulf of Mexico and descended on the city of Galveston, washing away bridges and downing telegraph poles in what was to be the deadliest natural disaster in American history. At least 6,000 Americans are believed to have perished in the storm, and the modern equivalent of about 1,070,000 worth of damage was actually it's more than that. 70 million worth of damage was incurred in the Galveston area alone. Galveston's Lakeview Cemetery, the transient resting place of Charles Coughlin, was not spared the rapid flooding and 140-mile-per-hour winds, which wreaked havoc upon the rest of the town. The damage, I cannot read today again. Sorry, guys. Wrought in the city's 6 graveyards was described in an article in the September 20th, 1900 issue of the St. Louis Daily Globe Democrat. In the cemeteries of Galveston was vaults made of stone and brick and cement. They were little houses with shelves or niches upon which rested the caskets. Some of the finest of these residents of the dead, as well as some of the humbler, were wrecked by the hurricane. They are ruins of wood, masonry, and metal. From the debris scattered about, it's evident that masses of floating material from destroyed houses were carried into the cemeteries and against these vaults, which such force as to crush them. The massive monuments, as well as many smaller tombstones, were overturned by the storm-made rafts. Some smaller headstones were carried many feet from the foundations. In not a few instances, the timbers struck the stones with such force as to shatter them. 2 of the Galveston cemetery presented a ghastly wrecked appearance. Bodies buried in the ground were not disturbed except in rare instances. But several vaults were crushed in such a manner as to leave the caskets within them exposed to wind and current. Thus, it was the storm carried off some of the dead, Most of the caskets of metal have an outer covering of wood, and the force of the storm was sufficient to float them. Although some caskets were later found lying some distance from the shattered mausoleums in which they once reposed, others were never recovered, apparently having been swept away in the Gulf of Mexico. As reported in various contemporary newspapers, one of the missing coffins was that of Charles Coughlin, for which a thorough but fruitless search was made. Coughlin's fellow actor Sir Johnson Forbes Robertson recorded the bizarre sequel to the tragedy in his 1925 autobiography, A Player Under Three Rains. The Gulf Stream, he wrote, bore him around Florida up the coast around 1,500 miles. Here, continued Sterling Ramsay, in the vicinity of Newfoundland, it somehow left the current and drifted aimlessly along the coast of eastern Canada, subject to wind and wave. 8 years later, in October of 1908, fishermen from Prince Edward Island headed out into the Gulf of St. Lawrence off the island's northern shore. While casting their nets, they spotted a strange oblong object floating on the waves. That is crazy. Which they promptly towed to store. The object, or to shore, told you I cannot read. Oh my God. The object proved to be a coffin encrusted with barnacles and seashells, which had evidently been adrift for many years. Hoping to identify the occupant of this grisly vessel, they pried the coffin open. Inside was the body of a middle-aged man whose name was engraved on a silver plate, Charles Francis Coughlin. The islander had finally returned home, just as the fortune teller predicted. Coughlin's body was brought to the nearest village, which proved to be the very same village in which the actor had been born, and laid to rest in the churchyard, the yard of the very same church in which he had been baptized. Somehow across the trackless sea, concluded Sterling Ramsay, Charles Coughlin had come home to stay. That is crazy. Although Charles Coughlin did own a summer home on the Fortune River just west of Souris, Prince Edward Island, at the time of his death, he was actually born in Paris, France, to parents of Irish and English extraction. His lead-lined casket, which was indeed washed out to sea by the Galveston hurricane, was reportedly discovered in January of 1907 in a lonely Texan marsh about 10 miles from the Lakeview Cemetery, and his body later brought to New York by his family for cremation. It must be mentioned that the most prosaic denouement to the drama of Charles Coughlin, which appeared in several newspapers, was called into question in 1927 following the publication of Ripley's cartoon. After reading the cartoon in the New York Evening Post, Coughlin's only daughter, actress Gertrude Coughlin, or Coughlin Pateau, of Bayside, Long Island, wrote the Post inquiring as to the source of Ripley's extraordinary statement, stating that if she thought there could be any truth to it, she would start a search on Prince Edward Island for her father's body. Pateau's inquiry, of course, implies that either Coughlin's body was not recovered in Texas and cremated in New York, or that the actor's only daughter was unaware that such developments had taken place. Whatever the case, Robert Ripley wrote Gertrude Pateau. It's weird how we don't have these names anymore. To inform, I'm kind of glad we don't. Some of these names are weird. To inform her that he had acquired his information from the biographies of Coughlin's good friend and fellow actor Sir Johnson Forbes Robertson and Lily Linktree. To the best of the author's knowledge, the true fate of Charles Coughlin's body remains a mystery to this day. The romantic tale of his remains finding their way to place of his birth is unquestionably a fabrication based on the misconception that the actor was a native of Prince Edward Island. Nevertheless, Gertrude Pateau's ignorance of the alleged recovery of her father's corpse outside Galveston and its subsequent cremation in New York City is strong evidence that such events never actually took place, hinting that the actor's casket may have indeed washed up on the shores of Prince Edward Island, as some of his closest friends seem to have believed. Whatever truth lies at the heart of this convoluted chronicle, the story of Coughlin's coffin is an intriguing one which deserves a place among Canadians' greatest urban legends. Carol goes, hey, that's the island I got the scar on my chin. Oh, cool. I mean, I guess not cool because it's a scar. Wendigo's nature has a way of taking control. True. Well, I mean, there's people that wanted to say that was true or was fake, but then evidently it looks like it may very well be true. Brandon goes, Bernadette and I were just out there. I always wanted to visit the cemetery. Wendy, that was what I was thinking, but why a lead-lined coffin? Are they trying to stay away from Superman's X-ray vision or something? I don't know. For some odd reason, when I first read that, I was thinking of vampires. I don't know why. Just a vampire came into mind with that one. But why? And then it said, but wouldn't that cause it to have weight too? Because it also mentioned, though, there was wood on it that caused them to float, but I would feel like that would add weight to it. So I don't know. To each his own. And that's why it is an urban legend. We will never know. All right, this one is, I was just seeing how long it is. The vanished village of Angikuni Lake. I did talk about this. I think Kyle had shared about it, and I did talk about this. Deep in the Keewatin Barrens of what is now the territory of Nunavut, amid an endless plain of tundra and muskeg, lies lonely Angikuni Lake, one of a myriad of near identical watering holes which doubt the historical homeland of the Inuit and Chippewayan nations. Although this nondescript body of water, with its resident population of caribou, black flies, and tundra wolves, bears no outward characteristics which might distinguish it from its many cousins, it happens to lie near the junction of two ancient trade routes which connect Hudson Bay with the Arctic Ocean. It also serves as the setting of one of Canada's spookiest urban legend. On November 25th of 1930, a disturbing article appeared in the Muncie Evening Press, a newspaper based out of the city of Muncie, Indiana. In a front page piece complete with 3 photos, journalist Emmett E. Keller, a reporter for the Newspaper Enterprise Association based out of the northern frontier city of La Paz, Manitoba, described the mysterious disappearance of an Inuit village on the shores of northernly Angikuni Lake. Far up in the heart of one of the most lonely passes on Earth, Keller began in the Lake Angikuni country. A whole tribe of Eskimos had vanished. Sorry about that, guys. Excuse me. Somewhere, somehow, the endless desolation of Canada's northern barren lands had swallowed up to 25 men, women, and children. I do remember this. I did a stream about this one. And it's probably gonna be more in depth than what this says. It is one of the most puzzling mysteries that has ever come down of the Arctic. The news of it has just reached the pass of the fringe of civilization. Keller went on to explain how a white man named Joe LaBelle, whom he described as a roving trapper of the barren lands, came upon the tribe's abandoned camp while crossing Angikuni Lake in his canoe. Long before he paddled to shore, LaBelle knew that something was very wrong. Instead of the lively hum of activity which typically surrounded Inuit camps, the only humming in evidence was that of black flies, which swarmed about the bodies of 7 sled dogs scattered throughout the grounds. When he hailed the camp's unseen occupants, he was greeted by 2 half-starved huskies, which rose up on a skeletal legs and slunk toward him, substituting the lusty barks by which Inuit sled dogs typically address strangers with pitiful whines. Suspecting that the village had fallen victim to some terrible disease, LaBelle walked over to one of the several ragged tents that compromised the camp and cautiously drew back its caribou skin door. I'll admit that when I went into the first tent, I was a little jumpy. He told Keller, just looking around, I could see the place hadn't known any human life for months, and I expected to find corpses inside, but there was nothing there but the personal belongings of a family. A couple of deer parkas were in one corner. Fish and deer bones were scattered about. There were a few pairs of boots and an iron pot, greasy and black. Under one of the parkas, I found a pew pew. It had been there so long it was all rusty. The whole thing looked as if it had been left just the way by people who expected to come back, but they hadn't come back. The trapper examined another tent, which had been torn to ribbons by the wind. Inside, he found 3 fox skins and a rusty pew pew. Those 2 pew pews seemed strange, he said. The last thing an Eskimo ever parts with is his pew pew. Try as he might, LaBelle was unable to find any clues as to the fate of the vanished Inuit. There were no signs of trouble or violence. The only thing of interest he noted was an empty stone cairn by the lake shore, which he tentatively identified as a desecrated Inuit grave. LaBelle told Keller, give me a second, guys. Sorry, guys. Following his disturbing discovery, LaBelle traveled throughout the surrounding tundra, visiting several Inuit camps along the way. None of the natives he met were able to shed any light on the fate of the missing kinsmen, supposing as he had that they had probably been taken by the torn rack. I'm gonna skip some of the story because I feel like this article kind of I feel like it goes into a college essay. I just want the story. That's all I want. I don't need explanation. You know what I mean? Whether merely a northern yard or a genuine report overlooked by an understaffed and underfunded RCMP detachment, the tale of the vanished village of Anjakuni Lake remains an excellent campfire story, and its more imaginative derivatives, some of Canada's greatest urban legends. I felt like that one kind of, I just wanted to know about the urban legends, but it was like kind of deep diving and going, why is this real? This could be real because of this, or this is fake because this. And I'm like, I didn't want to know that. I just wanted to know if the urban legend. So Carol, speaking about the previous story, goes, the coffin is made of English oak and lined with lead, which is a traditional design choice for members of the royal family. It also preserves the body better. It's sealed tighter, I'm assuming. The lead is also easily melted, also which they could have done to create an airtight seal. Carol also adds, more or less depends on their beliefs, the queen was buried in a lead-lined coffin as well. Let me see. I think I'll do, because my eyes does. Okay, I'll do this one because my eyes are kind of deceiving me here. Like my eyes are doing weird things. These are new glasses, by the way, so sometimes I see things like super clear and sometimes I don't. I think I'm still adjusting. So don't mind me if I'm so this is the Great Canadian Legends from the Rocky Mountains. So over the years, the soaring peaks of the Canadian Rockies have inspired tall tales that tend to grow taller each time they've shared among a roaring campfire or a dinner table, ranging from silly to sinister. These captivating stories never fail to spark the imagination nor a yearning to explore the mysteries of this hauntingly beautiful wilderness. The Great Canadian Legends, the legend of Kicking Horse. A name you won't soon forget, Kicking Horse Pass has a rather epic story behind its unusual moniker. In 1858, while accompanying John Palliser on an expedition to find a route through the Canadian Rockies, To extend the railway, a geologist named James Hector splashed into a nearby river chasing a pack horse that had come loose. Tying him up near his own steed, the two horses began to fight, and Hector ended up kicked in the head and knocked out cold to the point where his indigenous guides assumed him dead. He awakened to find himself in their arms on the way to his grave. Once confirmed that he was in fact still among the living, he explored the valley and river further. The train eventually came this way, and both the mountain pass and river would end up being named in honor of the Canadian legend. That is the kind of article I wanted. Carol goes, speaking of glasses, I don't wear mine. They hurt my eyes. Wendy goes, new glasses suck. Lisa's still having problems with mine. Actually, I could see better with these. 100% better. Even when I'm driving at night, I could see, like, the glare doesn't bother me as much. I notice even during the day, like, I would go out and the sun glare would bother me. So I noticed with these, I do see a lot better, but then I think I'm still getting used to them. The hoodoos, if you ever find yourself in Drumheller, Alberta, I hope I pronounced that correctly, you'll want to keep an eye out for these bizarre yet beautiful spires of rock known as hoodoos. The fascinating formations can tower as high as 45 meters and provide a breathtaking photo op. So they are pictured above those. They look amazing. Those are awesome. Although a geologist would explain them away as the product of millions of years of erosion in which a lower layer of soft rock wears away, leaving a top-heavy layer of harder rock balancing precariously on a thin stem, Canadian legends are somewhat more poetic. According to folklore, these monoliths, sometimes called fairy chimneys, were human beings until a witch turned them to stone. Other Canadian legends tell of travelers witnessing the hoodoos reveal themselves to be wizards, offering a helping hand by pointing them in the right direction. The Sasquatch, according to Canadian legend, the giant furry creature has been stalking the woods and waters of the Pacific Northwest for centuries, sometimes called Bigfoot. The term Sasquatch was coined in the 1920s by a Canadian government agent named J.W. Burns in a series of newspaper articles based on indigenous stories he collected as he traveled the West. Most biologists and other scientists refute Bigfoot's existence, instead asserting sightings of the creature to be mistaken encounters by a grizzly or black bear. I think there's some truth to him. Nevertheless, the Canadian legend is so ingrained in the lore of the Rockies that it even made its way into the Rocky Mountaineers' official field guide to local wildlife. According to the guide, which with tongue planted firmly in cheek classifies the bipedal beast under its Latin name of Futius bigus. Guests should keep their eyes peeled for a beast with an ape-like facial feature standing 3 meters in height. If you don't spot the notorious shy guy, perhaps you'll see evidence in the form of a footprint. They're hard to miss as they are reportedly 67 centimeters from heel to toe. What's in a name? Sasquatch is actually an angilicized version of the term Saquitz, used by the Halkomelin First Nation to describe a mysterious mythical wild man. That is cool. The Ogopogo. You don't have to venture all the way to Loch Ness for a chance to spot a sea serpent. According to the legend of Okanagan Lake, which winds 135 kilometers from Vernon to Penticton, British Columbia, it has its very own modern day monster dubbed Ogopogo. The elusive beast is alleged to be 15 meters long, and some cryptozoologists suggest it's a leftover from the day of the dinosaurs. Numerous sightings of the creature have been recorded since the 19th century, and the legend of Ogopogo has spread beyond the Great White North and become the topic of several monster investigation TV shows. Dusty, how's it going? A real-life ghost town in the mood for a spine-tingling adventure. How about exploring a real-life ghost town? 100 years ago, Bankhead, Alberta, located less than 10 kilometers from Banff, was a bustling coal mining community that boasted some 1,500 residents. Utterly abandoned after the closure of the mines in the early 1920s, it's now one of Banff's National Park's most haunting ruins. While some of the most significant buildings, including the railway station, have now been relocated to the Banff town site, you can take a walk along an interpretive trail through Bankhead to see that what remains, although you should probably do some during the day lest you attract any unanticipated guides. And I guess that's it for that one. I've never actually been to like an abandoned town, and I think that would be so cool. So guys, what did you think of the spooky urban legends and the